Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm really excited to be moderating this panel with some amazing founders. A little bit about myself before we get started with introductions. My name is Greene. I host a podcast called Stairway to CEO, where I interview founders and CEOs about how they built their brands. I'm also a former founder. I started a company called Wearaway and sold it in 2019 to Greene. And I'm also operating partner for an investment firm here in New York called Secor Capital. So we'll kick it off with some introductions. If you guys could each share a little bit about yourself, your company, and why you decided to start your business. Bruce?
So my name is Bruce Smith. I got sucked into this founder BS stuff. Not just because of my initials, but I'm a rowing coach. I've coached the national team at the World Championships 10 times for the United States, and started this company, Hydrow, in 2018, just before the pandemic, which was very good timing on my part. So.
Wow. I'm Lisa, the co-founder and chief brand officer of Studs. Studs is an ear piercing and earring brand. We've reimagined a better ear piercing experience and connected it to earring shopping. We're a retail first brand. We have 19 locations across the country and e-commerce. I started Studs to build a brand from scratch. I'd been in startups for a long time and wanted to do it with my co-founder, our CEO. We did survive as a retail company in the pandemic successfully, and we're able to talk a little bit about pivoting to e-com during that time, but ultimately recently have scaled quickly the national footprint.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Ariane Goldman, the founder and CEO of Hatch Collective. I'm actually the founder of Hatch Collection, which is a maternity brand designed for women before, during, and after pregnancy, and have taken that into an omni-channel, omni-category business over the last 10 years. In the past 6 months, I've consolidated the competition, and now I'm the CEO of some other brands in the marketplace, Pee in the Pod, Destination Maternity, and now we're kind of all under Hatch Collective. So I'm overseeing and architecting the category itself, which is an interesting new role.
Hi, I'm Aaron Luo. I'm the co-founder CEO of, I'm operating 2 brands now. One is Mercado Famous. We bring Spanish charcuterie in the package goods fashion to the States. And in addition, I'm also the CEO of Cara. We're a luxury handbag brand for functional handbags, specifically designed initially for millennial women, but really expanded into a gamut of different consumers that we have. So
Awesome.
Very different 2 categories.
Thanks so much for introducing yourselves. To kick off the conversation, let's talk about what it's like to build a brand in today's ever-changing environment. What are some challenges that are top of mind for you guys? Who is first?
I'll kick it off. I think probably the challenges that most people have been facing is there are no really reliable e-commerce direct-to-consumer levers. So people have been really thinking about all the other distribution channels that people talked about today, wholesale, retail. At Studs, we were always going to be a retail-first company, but I think have really defined for ourselves what omni-channel means and have gotten very, very clear on where we spend our marketing dollars based on the LTV of the customer, and have really focused on acquiring a retail customer that will get a piercing instead of just acquiring e-com customers in other parts of the country, and have sort of focused on geolocated acquisition models around our stores. And so that has been top of mind for us and has been working for us. But we also have a service in our store that kind of allows us to have that strategy that's very sticky. So that's been kind of on our mind.
Thanks. Aaron?
Yeah, I think, and you hear from the other panelists early in the day, I think customer acquisition for sure, it's on top of mind for all of us. I mean, the CAC equation is very difficult, I think, in, the 2 verticals that we're in, both in fashion retail and the luxury side and also in the CPG space. So, how do we cut through the noise? For us, it's content. We're investing a ton in content. We brought it all in-house during COVID. We think that's a much effective way of creating genuine content versus, kind of outsource all of that. We do work with, of course, influencers and celebrities and so on and so forth. But I think customer acquisition is one, and then of course the second thing is retention, which I think many folks before also touched on. omni-channel is a buzzy word, and we start using that 7-8 years ago when we started Kara. I think it's more relevant than ever, just because I think consumers don't shop in one channel or one platform only. They're everywhere, right? In terms of store, online, wholesale, and so on and so forth. So I think how do we effectively do that while still being profitable? I think that's one thing that we are constantly thinking about for both of our brands.
Any unexpected challenges that you guys have faced over the past year?
What day is it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think being a founder, it's just a constant, game of whack-a-mole of kind of what challenges you're going to try and, get through on a daily basis. I'm actually going through the exercise right now. So Hatch, I've been at the helm of for the last decade and been able to kind of crystallize it and really hone in on that consumer proposition, what the product looks like, all that messaging, and taking on this next taking on these brands that have brand equity, but they're quite archaic in their offering. I'm actually going through a rebranding exercise right now and asking myself this very question of how do you build a brand in today's world? And, I think there's a lot of risk involved because the world around us is just changing so quickly. And, the risk that I'm going to take is to almost leave behind the current customer for the sake of speaking to the next generation of customers. And, I'm also aged out a little bit of what this next generation looks like. So figuring out how to be nimble and keep in touch with the things that matter to them and how to keep a product assortment so tight that you can buy deep and rely less on a wider, inventory range and just be smarter about that and just kind of be able to double down on what's working. So there's lots of different variables, but it's definitely a different market right now. And I definitely agree that diversifying your channels so that when supply chain issues hit, when there's, there used to be, in all contracts, there's like an act of God clause that would get you out of things. Well, that doesn't exist anymore because all of the shit's been happening. So it's kind of like anything can go and you kind of have to just imagine that it might happen. And so figuring out the best way to be nimble and play defense all the time is now an offensive strategy.
Definitely. What about you, Bruce? Anything top of mind?
Storytelling is probably the most important thing that we've been focusing on, and that your point about making your own content. And I think the attention economy used to be something you could just apply money to, and money was free. Money's not free anymore, and you can't just apply money, so you can't beat people around the head. So you have to make really, really compelling content, and it's much harder and less reliable. And I think that organic growth and the product has become way more important. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's what great, really great experiences and brands are from. But that ability to tell your story in a way that's sticky is like 100 times more important than it was when you could get $100 million just to pay for, customers.
Have you guys made any shifts in your marketing strategy over the past year? Like, where are you putting the money now and maybe weren't before? Have you made any adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, it's radical. So we had a contract with Performix for $55 million last year, and we have a contract for $0 with Performix this year.
Wow.
And we're fortunate because we have a subscription product, so we have a really big ARR, $40 plus million in ARR with great retention. So we have this group of people, but that is our engine now, and incredibly grateful that we got to build the engine with somebody else's money in equity, not debt, and we're really leveraging that, and it's much more challenging, but also much more rewarding.
We spent a lot of time in the first couple of years of Studs doing a lot of brand campaigns and collabs and drops. And I mean, that was very fun for me, and I'm glad we did that. But I would say this year, the focus is on evergreen core marketing, building our own content machine, building education, and building reliable playbooks instead of maybe having that giant event or that big buzzy collab, doing some of the things that are more just for brand equity, doing them more in a scrappy way. And we're still doing them, and we have a bunch of really cool collabs coming out in the second half of the year, but we aren't investing the same dollars in them. And we're trying to spend our resources more on, now that we have scaled locations across the country, more figuring out those reliable playbooks with the resources we have. And I think it's also part of just what's happened in the economy, but also probably just about our life cycle, where in the beginning you're sort of making a splash and now we're working on scale.
The most notable move we made was bringing influencer in-house and really taking some of those dollars outside of performance and just bringing it organically into gifting and getting kind of these micro-influencers, which I know have been a buzzword for a while, but it really is working. I have a unique challenge of only having 9 months of attention span of my customers, so I have to keep gifting stuff for it to work. But it's been a tremendous lever for us to play with, and we'll apply it to the other brands now too.
And when you say in-house, you mean you brought it in-house from an agency that maybe you had before, and so you've seen a big difference in having it in-house versus...
Yeah, we get to control it. We're closer to the product. We're paying less fees. Just you have to have the bandwidth and just get going to take it in-house, but it was definitely worthwhile.
We did that as well. Definitely worth it.
Yeah. I think performance marketing is such a drug, right? I mean, I think before COVID, right, it used to be, and we started Cara in 2014, and that was still decent in terms of the CAC. I mean, the ROAS was still like 3 to 5. Every dollar you spend, you get a $5, $3 back. I do that any day of the week, right? I think that changed dramatically. And I mean, I think similar to Bruce and to other folks here, we pull back our performance marketing dollars in a big way, like 90% cut. And then reallocated that to influencers, content creation. What that did is that I think we had to readjust our expectations, right? In the olden days, I call it a drug because I spend $1, less than 30 days, I can see that dollar back. Now I spend $1, it might be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So I think our projections also have to reset. Now for us, fortunately, we don't have to answer to a board or investment board just because we're bootstrapped from the beginning. So we can easily meet our core team and readjust those expectations. Of course, taking some measurements in terms of managing our costs to ensure that we're still profitable. But I think that's the biggest change for us, is that it's still a very valid and still powerful channel, right? I think, we always say we don't want more than 20% of our revenue coming from performance marketing, just kind of as a rule of thumb. Just because I think, I've seen brands that, go up 60, 70% of the revenue coming from performance marketing. And it's okay if your ROAS is 3+ or, depending on unit economics. But if you hit, a period where your ROAS is below 2 or 1, you're screwed, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge for us, is that reset everything, rearrange our budget, rearrange our expectations in terms of what a 2-year, 3-year projection looks like.
Interesting. And I heard you say something, I think, Lisa, about diversifying distribution channels. I think you mentioned that you've opened 20 locations in just 3 years. Can maybe you talk to us a little bit about your approach to opening your own stores and advice for other entrepreneurs looking to do the same?
Yeah, I think studs, you cannot do ear piercing online or via Amazon, so you have to go to a location to get a needle in your ear. So we do have sort of an authentic in-person experience, which is great. And there was a lot of latent demand for safe and healthy ear piercing with needles instead of guns with experts. So I think the product market fit was there. And I think what we've been experimenting with now that we really nailed the ear piercing experience is how to increase same-store sales on the fashion assortment, which is the earrings that we sell when you're not getting pierced. And what we found really effective recently is stuff that we've tested on e-com that really drove sales, especially during COVID, figuring out how to transition that to retail. So one thing that was really successful for studs were mystery bundles online. And now we have the mystery machine in store, which is a gumball machine where you put in a token and you get 2 surprise earrings. And it's really effective in store. And we were bundling earrings into earscape sets online. We just built our first, cash and carry earscape set fixture. And so we're starting to just test things online and just figure out how to increase same-store sales in the studios. And we're focusing a lot on that. And I think if you can find an authentic reason for people to come to your studio that's experiential or a service or something that's there that's not online, and then kind of give them a full experience, we've found that to be really effective and to reach different customers, whether the customer that's shopping with friends or wants to get a gift or just wants to get a piercing, you can kind of hit all of those customer needs.
I love those moments when you're building a business and you're like, let's test this one thing, and then you test it. And sometimes it doesn't work, but when it does, it's such a fun feeling. Is there anything else that you guys have, what's something recent where maybe you've tested it and you were surprised by the results? You thought it was really an interesting thing that happened. Bruce, do you have anything?
Yeah, we gave Hydrows, it's a rowing machine. I don't know if anybody, there are rowing machines that are, we broadcast live from the water to your home. Otherwise known as Peloton, but cooler. Actually cooler. So giving Hydrows to Soho House is an instant, it's just amazing. It's fantastic. It's a triple win. They pay to subscribe. They never unsubscribe because they don't care about the $44 a month. And all these people cycle through and they're a perfect target customer. And we hear frequently from our customers that they have the Hydrow delivered and then they're like, oh, we have an NPS of 87. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea, which is super depressing as a marketing person. Like, how did you not know? And you still gave us money. But it is this opportunity to go in hotels. And so it's a big win for us, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ariane, do you have anything that's been surprising?
So we have 3 retail locations on the Hatch front, and just based on the retail footprint of our first store, we open the bottom level to events to bring in people so that they can learn, we can have conversations, miscarriages, prenatal training, all that good stuff. And I never realized that they were oversubscribed in person to build that community. And this was right before COVID. And then when COVID hit, and obviously everybody was at home, we surfaced our community events online digitally. And really that content and community power of bringing women together with education and support was a halo to the brand that I never anticipated when I started the company. And to me has been a huge lever of our success, is just that trust that you need to build with the customer.
What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, we're pretty experimental, especially with Mercado Famous, just because it's a small brand. It just launched a month ago. There's a lot of buzziness around there. Then we give ourselves the liberty to test different things. So the most recent surprise in a good way that I think we found is we start testing selling through WeChat. I don't know if you guys know the app WeChat. Widely used in the Asian communities and of course in China, but not so much in the States. But awesome outreach, usability. I see so many KPIs, how much people use that platform. So we utilize that to sell Mercado Famous, which is Spanish jamón, chorizo, and salchichón, and all the goodies that comes from Spain. We sell using that platform to Asian community and started very small. Really just working with influencers in terms of, hey, help us promote the product. And then, surprisingly, actually, we're still figuring out why, but there's a huge affinity of Asian community towards Spanish goods. So yeah, it's been
Wow.
great. Yeah, it's not to a point of scalability yet, right? But it's a new platform that we really didn't touch before. I'm a user, of course, but never really start capitalizing it in terms of commercialization, and it's been good.
Speaking of capital, fundraising has been a really tough environment for a lot of brands over the past year. I'd love to hear from Bruce and Aaron. You guys are kind of total opposites in this. Bruce, you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars over the past few years, and Aaron has bootstrapped 2 businesses that are also profitable. I would love to kind of hear everybody's kind of feedback on what the environment is like out there right now for fundraising and what your perspective is.
Bruce, why don't you?
Sure. So it sucks. Don't try and raise money right now. It was. I won't say it was easy, but I learned a lot. I really enjoy working with El Catterton. They're amazing investors, really, truly. Most investors that I meet, present company excluded, are not very good. In terms of they'd love to tell you how to be smarter, and they really believe that they're smarter because they have their checkbook. And El Catterton walks the walk. They work with really great companies, only great companies, and they are there from beginning to end, and pretty exceptional. That said, if we needed to, I have a friend who had to raise about a little more than $100 million, and all of the common shares got wiped out completely, zeroed out, gone. And so there goes 7 years of his life and all of the engineers and all the nice people. And the only people who are able to make money on that company are the ones who are, who did invest from beginning to end, especially at the end. So it's a double-edged sword, fabulous growth. And we wouldn't be here if we hadn't spent all that money. And we have this really lovely base of close to 100,000 subscribers, and that's what is allowing us to thrive through a down period. But it's definitely like tread carefully. I've done it both ways, and I would say that there are pluses and minuses on both sides.
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it also just comes down to, I don't know how many founders are in the audience, but in terms of what you want to build and what you want for yourself, right? Because if you raise, and especially in a meaningful way, you end up just giving up, a decent chunk of your company and end up just working yourself into a job, right? Which it's fine if that's kind of the route you want to take. I think for us, we didn't want to do that. We still looked at long term, talking to private equity and other ways to raise capital in a later stage of the brand, but. We in the beginning, honestly, we just knew that we will make a lot of mistakes, and before we can start thinking about scaling, we want to get the equation right. For us to really kind of trip on ourselves a little bit in a smaller way, so that we can scale meaningful way later on. But also just valuation. I mean, at the end of the day, the hope was always, look, if you get a decent brand off the ground, profitable, and so on and so forth, that later on, the valuation of your company will be a lot different. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Bruce. I have so many friends in the startup world that, great brands. I mean, you look at the product, the design is good, the product is decent, supply chain is fine. Every aspect of the brand works, but they raise a little early, went through the burn rate, right? Went through the 18-month, 24-month cash, hoping that, of course, they will do a second round, and of course, the well dried up. So now they're at the point where just like, I'm freelancing, and I'm finding ways to kind of keep it up, but that's a very reactive spot to be, I think, as a founder, right? To start raising from that point of view versus all the way around. So I agree with you.
It's a great time to go shopping for businesses.
Sure.
Like really, truly excellent.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is velocity has a different value today than it did like 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Money translates really successfully to velocity, and we went really, really fast. We built a product and delivered it in 6 months. So it's hard to do, costs a lot, but I think the world doesn't value velocity quite the same way that they did. They want to make money.
Yeah.
So.
Ariane, what about you? What are your thoughts on fundraising?
So I bootstrapped Hatch for the first 6 years, really kind of built it brick by brick, ground up. And then with proof of concept and ideas like retail rollout, a beauty line, capital intensive ideas, I decided to raise money. That was about 4 years ago. And then did a really, I think, terrific job of managing the cash while growing nicely over the pandemic and the supply chain issues. And then ultimately, when you make stuff, the cycle of cash, I mean, it's just so challenging. And so we really needed capital last year, and we held out as long as possible. And I didn't want to let anyone go, and I didn't want to necessarily rewind a couple of years just because of the world around us. And so went out to the market to find a partner. And at the time, we were very excited because we had been growing beautifully, and then the world changed underneath, very rapidly last April. So like if you were to put a red X on a calendar of when not to try and go to an M&A event, it would have been last April. But we found ourselves there, and I think the rest of last year was just really tedious trying to figure out how to celebrate all the wonderful things that we've built, but also survive. And so I was lucky enough to find a partner who had complementary brands, and I needed capital, and they needed our brains and our power and our expertise. And so we found a dance that worked for both of us. And so now that's why we consolidated the category. And I feel really grateful that I came out, because many of my friends who are founders as well, brands that I swear by and that most of us here would know, are just struggling really. It's just a really tough time right now. Mm-hmm. And it's not a reflection of how great your brand is. That's what's so upsetting.
Totally.
Definitely. Lisa, any thoughts on fundraising?
I think that, I feel really lucky right now that Studs' stores pay back very quickly, so that there is a profit machine in the company.
How long does it take?
All the stores aim to pay back in under a year. And so they're fast. And that has to do with a lot of why we would venture back a retail first company in the first place. So the premise was such, but it worked out, which was good. And I think for people right now that are trying to figure out where is their profit engine in their company, or how to even look towards profitability for the first time now, it's hard. Mm-hmm. And so I think obviously a lot of people are just cutting expenses and waiting and praying for the next check. And I think that does buy you some time, but at some point you have to find that thing that really makes money in the company. And so as much as people can figure that out early in this environment, and I think the constraints like bootstrapping really help you figure that out. The company I was at prior to Studs, where I was employee 6, Home Polish, was bootstrapped for the first 3 years before we raised venture. And got to, a pretty good revenue just on the dollars that came in and what you're doing. And so I think if you can force those constraints, if you're starting a company now, it makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. Looking back over the past few years, building your businesses and this entrepreneurial journey you've all been on, looking back, what's something that you wish you would have done differently? And don't say nothing. I know you've all learned a lesson somewhere along the way, with tons of lessons learned. What is something you would have done a little bit differently?
So many things. Really, truly. I think the biggest thing is understanding the difference between, I just didn't know this. I've worked for myself my whole life, and it's a bad habit probably. The ability to distinguish between corporate behavior and like real or actual business creation behavior, and being able to hire on that basis it's a crucial distinction. And we had to do a riff, and it came at a very good time because we were able to go back in time and kind of reset the clock on actual like bootstrappy hard work behavior.
What do you mean by that? Go dive in a little bit more.
So there are a group of people around the world who operate against a giant company's balance sheet, and their goal is to take care of their people. And they don't really, they're not mission driven, they're exceptional people, they're really good at their job, but they present themselves and their team to the company, and that's how they survive and advance. And they advance to the highest levels of Fortune 50 companies, and I've hired them. But they don't operate on a mission basis, and they don't operate with the ability to solve actual real product problems because they have this incredibly lucrative company that's backing them up. So it's just a different set of skills, and it's really different from actually starting a company where you have to do actual work. It's radically different. And I just didn't appreciate that. And also, I've never heard anybody say it out loud. Yeah. So I'm saying it out loud a lot. Yeah.
Good advice. Lisa, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was going to say something else, but I do think hiring and figuring out who you're hiring for and at what level and at what stage is very important. Going to your point just about the people that do things versus the people that manage things versus the people that might be good in 3 years. I think we definitely have had challenges finding people for that stage of the company where you need people that have strong leadership potential and strong management potential, but will really, really, really get in the weeds and build, and people that want to go early stage and have the potential to then grow teams. I think that's when you're on year 2, 3, 4, it's really hard to find the talent that wants to both get their hands dirty and do that work and also has that potential to then grow that team and lead in that way. And so sometimes you hire for the person you think that you need in 2 years and they can't do that immediate work. And then sometimes you hire the person for the immediate work and then they don't have that growth potential. So I think, I think hiring people that just really believe in the mission of the company and are great culture carriers is a great way to start. So I think we've made some of those mistakes. And then I think definitely spent a little too long on the direct-to-consumer e-commerce bandwagon for our category before kind of getting to the strategy we are at now. But I think made the pivot quickly enough.
Yeah, I agree to all that's been said. I think if given an opportunity to choose between investors, which I know is a tougher conversation today, choosing the right partners that potentially have LPs and pockets to dive into so that when things and the world around us, go down, it was really interesting to see comrades of mine, be able to be bailed out by their investors, and we weren't so lucky. And so, in retrospect, I might have proactively taken that into consideration because at the time I had a choice and I didn't realize how important that was. Not saying that the advice and all the wonderful things that I do get, but money in a time of need is everything. And so we had to go at it the hard way and get it ourselves.
Yeah, hiring, it's key. I feel like, in the early days, and I come from a corporate background just like Bruce, we were looking for generalists. It's very tricky to know when you need to start transitioning from generalist to specialist. And I don't know if we figured that out soon enough. Because, in the early days, right, you need probably 5 or 6 hockey players, we call them, right? We don't want football stars. We want hockey players that's going to grind and be on the ground with us. And they have to do everything from fulfillment to customer service to, working with the agency on the PDP. I mean, everything in between, right? But at one point, you need to start transitioning, I think, to specialists in terms of wholesale market opening or, brand building, art director, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the key. And then the only other thing I would say, again, retrospective, is that, and I'm sure many do this already, if you have good financial discipline, hold on to your cash. Like when you think about your balance sheet, we're a little too loose with our cash in terms of, well, we got it, it's invested, right? And I think that's great in an up market because the growth is coming in to fund that. And sometimes you have to, because you really need, in product company, like you have to have the money to buy inventory and wait that 6 to 9 months to turn the cash. But I think in retrospective, we probably might not make big investments early on and hold on to the cash a little longer to be a little bit more defensive.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.